Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Hello and welcome to a pint-sized preview sponsored by Magic Rock Brewing on Huddersfield Town's opponents this season. And in this episode, we're going to focus on Bristol City. But before we get into the Robins, let's hear what Bristol City fans Patch Warner and Matt Withers from the Three Peeps in a Podcast had to say.
Hi, so it's Patch Warner and Matt Withers here from Three Peeps in a Podcast. We're available on Twitter at 3PIAPC, and we have a Bristol City show. We follow City all over the country, and we review every game essentially. So what can go well for us this season? Well, we've got to build on from last season, in my opinion. Nigel Pearson is gradually bringing in his players, and we've got some real young talent coming through as well. So it's another year on from the talent that was shown last season. So we're looking for more improvement from the likes of Alex Scott, Tommy Conway, Antoine Semenyo. So a couple of players to call out there. What could go wrong, Matt?
We could end up losing some of those star players. So Antoine Semenyo is currently out injured. That is likely to keep him out for certainly the first couple of games. We're kind of a little bit grateful of that, because I think the season that finished, he was on fire, and if he'd started like that, then you could easily have seen bids coming in for him. So maybe his injury might be a bit of a blessing. But obviously what could go wrong is that injury goes for longer. Similarly, Alex Scott, very talented, one of the members of the European Championship winning England side. So, you know, we could lose him. You hope to keep your best players like any club. And if we do that, like Pat said, I think, you know, we've got a reasonable chance, and we just want to see an improvement on some of the football we watched last season, and hopefully not a relegation sort of battle.
Yeah, and talking about last season, obviously we really struggled at home. We put it right towards the third of the season. So that's something that else needs, hopefully can be improved on this year, is that home form. You mentioned Nigel Pearson already. For me, he is the right manager. We were in need of someone who was going to come in and mix things up a bit. And I think he came in at the right time. Didn't have a great start, but he's gradually bringing in his players, and we've seen improvements towards the end of last season. For you, Matt?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, his record, and you know, you can use stats for many things, but his record is probably in the bottom three all time of Bristol City managers. But he does need to bring his own players in, so I think that's why he's still got the majority of the supporters behind him. But it will very much depend on how we start. I think if we have a bad start and we get to kind of October, November time struggling, then I think it will be very, very difficult for him to remain in his position. You know, as I talked about, we watched a lot of fairly turgid football the last couple of seasons. And he's not convinced everybody. There is part of the fan base that are really still not convinced by Nigel Pearson. So, you know, personally, like Patch, for me, he is the right man. But it's a result business, like any manager knows. So he needs to improve this season, definitely.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's always great to get a good start in the league. In terms of predictions, as it stands at the moment, I think I'm looking around 12th, 13th, based on the fact that we probably need a couple more signings. We've made some good signings so far in Cal Naismith from Luton, who was, I think, their player of the year. Kane Wilson from Forest Green, who was also their player of the year, and we've seen him in a few friendlies, and he looks good down the right wing back, get some good crosses in. Sykes from Oxford, who's a bit of a utility player. He'll add great bits to the squad. And then signing Closer as well, who played for us from January, last season. So he's a permanent sign-in. So the signings have been good. I think we just need a couple more. Where do you think we need to strengthen that?
For me, central midfield. We need a strong midfielder in there, sort of box to box. We probably need another centre half. We've let a couple of sort of youngsters go, or players that have been in and around. Nathan Baker, who suffered a number of head injuries last season, but certainly looks not going to be available this season again. So probably a centre half and probably a centre forward. But again, dependent on what happens with Antoine Semenyo, with Naki Wells, who's been in and around the sort of starting lineup, but hasn't cemented a starting position. Last year of his contract, if a bid comes in, then we may look at that. So probably for me, it's that spine of the team, centre half, centre mid, and centre forward.
Well, especially if we seem to shape up 3-5-2, if you like, or 5-3-2 in a defensive situation. You need at least one more centre back, didn't you, to replace Baker? Yeah, good shape. Thanks for having us on, and we'll be seeing you this coming season. Take care.
Best of luck for the season.
Cheers all.
Okay, thanks to Patch and Matt, both sat in a car there. I can guarantee you that they were ready to watch a friendly at Forest Green Rovers, and there was nothing about steamy windows and dodgy people outside watching, so don't worry about that. Moving on to Bristol City. So it's not really gone as planned, has it, guys, for Bristol City? I don't think over the last few years. I think they probably expected a little bit more from Nigel Pearson coming in, but I think Nigel Pearson slowly has been turning things around at Ashton Gate. Their home form was absolutely woeful last year, but towards the last sort of quarter of the season, maybe third, they started to turn that around a little bit. And I think Nigel Pearson has slowly been moving some players out. There's been quite a lot of big earners there at Bristol City as well that they've managed to just kind of go, one of them being Casey Palmer. And I think he's starting to get things on a bit of an even keel there. So in terms of key players, they've still got Andy Vyman, who got 22 goals last year. Really impressive from the right wing. He even played right wing back a lot. So, Andy Vyman was really key. And up front, they've got a really smashing young player who I wanted Huddersfield to go for if we'd have got through the playoffs, which was Antoine Semenyo. I think he's a really good player. Scored a lot of emphatic goals. And Alex Scott in midfield. So they've got some good young players coming through Bristol City. And they've also got Masengo as well in midfield, who's been linked with a couple of moves away, but currently he's still there. So Bristol City have got a number of key players. In terms of transfers, they've brought in Naismith from Luton. He was Luton's player of the year. I think that's a really good move to bring him in. If he recaptures that Luton form, then that's going to be a great signing for Bristol City. And I think the most interesting one is probably Kane Wilson, isn't it? The right back who's coming from Forest Green. He got 14 assists from right back for Forest Green last year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he transitions up a couple of divisions. But I think on paper, that looks quite a decent signing for them, and definitely a step up from Danny Simpson, as we saw from Danny a couple of years ago. But yeah, they've lost Callum O'Dowd and Casey Palmer, but I don't think they've lost anyone that'd actually be upset to lose as well. So I think Nigel Pearson slowly turning, there's a slow churn going on there. And I think Bristol City have started to move in a slightly better direction. And if I move on to predictions for them already. So again, we know about Nigel Pearson. I've spoke about them. The odds for them, the 20th favourites for promotion and 5th favourites to go down. I think they're going to be okay this season. I think there's been a little bit of slow progress, like I mentioned. If Nigel Pearson isn't the man and they get off to a slow start, I think they'll act quickly on that and probably make that change. But I think if they stay patient, I think Bristol City will start moving from the bottom half or bottom 6, 7 where they were last year up to sort of mid-table. It's going to be slow progress, but like I say, it's going to be about patience for Bristol City, and if they show it, then I think they'll probably be rewarded at the end. But how do you guys think they'll do? I'll go to you, Brady, because you're nodding away.
They're tricky. I think they're one of them teams where, when we were doing our kind of prediction tables, I think they're kind of hard to call. So I've just done the cop out and kind of put them in mid-table somewhere. I think that could be higher mid-table or lower mid-table. You touched on some of the good players. I really like Alex Scott. He had an impressive, came on and made a difference in quite a few of the under-19 games for England when they won the Euros. Semenyo is a player I like. Vyman, I think that goal scoring record came out of nowhere. I'm not going to say one season wonder because he's shown he can do it at this level, but I'm not sure if he'll get the same goal returns as he did last season. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but looking at his previous career, it almost felt like not a fluke, but just a bit of a surprise. I kind of agree with you about Pearson. I thought he'd come in and kind of change things and they'd be progressing a lot quicker than they have. I know we've talked about it before, but certainly a couple of seasons, I think it was that lockdown season, Bristol's squad was huge. They could have fell two championship teams. I know Dave's mentioned that, like when we were playing them. So yeah, they're a hard one to predict, really. They're one of them where I agree with you. If it doesn't start well, Pearson could go, and then it's dependent on who they bring in. But I feel like we could say that it's quite a few teams in the table. So yeah, a tough one, really.
Yeah, I don't. I think those odds are a bit harsh on them. Yeah, being the 5th favourites to go down this season. I do think. I always think with Pearson, surely one season it'll come all right with him at the helm. So maybe this is the year. I don't know if they'll be pushing for that kind of top 6, but I do think they'll be a lot more solid than last season and not be worrying about anything below like bottom 6 or anything, in my opinion.
Slightly different, slightly back the trend. I think they're going to be there or thereabouts. I think they've recruited pretty well. I think Pearson is a good manager who hasn't had the squad or the first 11 he's wanted, and I think he's got far more control over this team now. And I think they could well have the season that Coventry had last season, or even actually get over the line, unlike Coventry did last year. So I actually think they'll be pushing, and pushing for top 8, and could well finish in there.
I was tapering mine, but I was looking at some of the signings and the team they've got, and I think what's really sort of important for Nigel Pearson is he's got that, and Brady, you alluded to it, he's got that smaller group now, and I think you look at our success has come from having a really sort of pool of players, 15, 16 decent ones pushing in the same direction, and I just feel that I agree with Dave to a point. I think he's got that now, or he's getting to that point, and they're pushing in the right way. I just think that it's slow progress, but it could all of a sudden catch fire and they take off. But yeah, I agree. I think there's the better days ahead, aren't they, for Bristol City for me? But that's it for Bristol City. So if you agree, disagree, let us know in the comments, and keep an eye out for our prediction game as well. Make sure you join up to that, and if you can beat the likes of myself, Brady, Dave, and Tom, and maybe there'll be a prize at the end of it. Who knows? So thanks, and check you next time.